Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We're going to officially start our broadcast this morning of the wildlife area over at the Los Alamos Nature Center. Los Alamos Nature Center is operated by the Pajarito Environmental Education Agency, the center. Yeah. Unfortunately, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we are following the guidelines that were put out by the County of Los Alamos. We're closed to the public. So we thought we would at least try to bring you through the video stream that is always here at the Nature Center. We thought we'd bring you a view of what's been going on here. So I'm going to reposition the camera that looks into the observation area. We'll give you just a short tour. My name is Bob Walker. I tend to come by here regularly to keep an eye on what's going on in the observation area, and I'm accompanied by Siobhan Nicholson, who is monitoring the web pages and things like that so that I don't have to pay attention to too many different things at once. So in the observation area, we have basically all of the elements that are needed in order to attract wildlife to this small little area on the back side of the Nature Center, is the north side facing Acid Canyon. The elements that are important for attracting wildlife include, of course, the availability of food, and we augment the natural food sources that are here in the canyon because we put out bird seed, which we acquire here locally at Pangea. The bird seed brings in a lot of ground feeders, both birds, squirrels, and chipmunks. And we also put out suet, which is a very high calorie dense food for the birds. They especially are attracted to suet in the winter. We also have some thistle feeders. Thistle seed is very attractive to a couple of species of birds, and it is not as interesting to the squirrels or some other animals, so you pretty much can guarantee you just get pine siskins and lesser goldfinches and occasionally a nuthatch or something that will try to extract feed from the wire mesh that holds in the thistle seed in the thistle feeders. So we have seed, we have suet. Well, the seed that we get, Siobhan asks what kind of seed do we get, and Pet Pangea has a couple of kinds of seed mixes that is the bulk of what we feed out here. One of them is a mix they call a Sangre de Cristo mix, and it's mostly black oil sunflower seed. There's some white millet. There's some corn and some other minor constituents that I can't even remember right now. But they provide this from a seed producer. I think that at least the bags say they come from Corrales or somewhere in the local area. So we have usually Sangre de Cristo mix. We often augment that with just plain black oil sunflower seed because that's probably the number one seed component that all of the animals, chipmunks, squirrels, and birds like. They go after the sunflower seeds first, and then the millet second, I would say, and corn and other components last. So at the end of the day, or on a day when we skip feeding, that's what tends to be left is the lesser components of the seed mix. So on one of the rocks here right in the front of the pond, is a place where we have some chipmunks right now. Let's zoom in on that. You can see there's a couple of chipmunks that are attracted to the seed, a little handful of seed that we put out on that rock just to give them a treat early in the morning. So we've got 3 chipmunks scurrying around there. The pond itself, I'm going to move the camera over to looking at a close-up of just the pond. This is a very favorite place for foxes to come at night. They come in, they get a sip of water from the pond. We get lots of raccoons. Almost every night, I would say, we get 1 or more raccoons come in, and they wade around in the shallow areas of the pond and must obviously be finding something interesting to eat. I know there's a fair amount of algae that grows in the pond. Last night we had a couple of visitors. Around 5 in the morning, a fox came by, and he walked around the outside of the area, then came back inside and had a drink of water and wandered off. That was around 5 o'clock. Earlier in the evening, we had our regular raccoon visit. Only think I remember seeing 1 raccoon this time, but sometimes we get families of 2 or 3. So the way the pond works is we have, I'm going to pan to the left over here, and you'll see that the pond drains in to a skimmer box where we have a pump, and the pump pushes water back up towards the other end of the pond where it spills out. I'm going to pan over there sort of slowly, and the water comes out of a waterfall. This may be, it's almost right below where the video camera is set up. So we have the water coming out of the waterfall area. It makes a nice splashing sound. It runs in a thin stream over a bunch of rocks, and that is interesting to the birds. They hear the water and are attracted to the observation area because of the moving water. So that's one of the elements that is pretty interesting for attracting animals. Do you have to have a pond? Well, no. Actually, it's nice, really, to have some water that's moving, but let's zip back over to the water saucer. I'm going to pan quickly, so watch out. So we have on the corner of one of the fence rails just a shallow tray that we can put water in. And I know at some of the stores, like Wild Birds Unlimited, you can get little gadgets that either are electric powered or solar powered or battery powered, and let's just call them wigglers. You can put them inside these shallow water trays, and just the movement of the water, the birds flying over can see the water wiggling, and then they'll know that that's water, and they'll come down and take a drink from it. So you don't have to have a pond. The pond is nice as a visual element, and of course, the more water, then there's more edges and places for the birds to approach. But a water tray like this, saucer bird bath, is a perfectly fine way of doing it. And I know what I do at my house is I take an old flower pot and turn it upside down, and then set the saucer that the flower pot usually drains in, set it on top of the flower pot and put water in it. And that's actually a very effective way of attracting birds with an investment only in a flower pot. So let's go back and move the camera to looking at the wider view of the whole pond area. So we're gonna zip around. That's the pond. We can go all the way from the bridge, which you see at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. There's a bridge that you can walk across. Both the animals do. We have pictures from a wildlife still camera where we have foxes and skunks and deer and bears walking across that bridge in the middle of the night. So let's see, I wanted to position where you can also see a tray feeder. There's no birds on the tray feeder, but right in front of the window of the observation room, there's a tray feeder, which you can now see on the left-hand side of the screen. It's got this little bell-shaped device on the pole that keeps the squirrels from climbing up there and eating up all the seeds. So the purpose of that tray feeder is just to be very particular about only feeding birds out of that one. We get a lot of kids and a lot of school children come into the observation area during school sessions in particular, and they are almost always more interested in the squirrels and the chipmunks than they are the birds. So we don't mind feeding them. They are very interesting and amusing personality-wise, and the kids just love them.
Can you tell us a little bit about the layout of the bird feeder area that you think about?
Well, we can take, Siobhan asks about the layout of the bird feeder area. It's almost all the area is consumed by the pond, and around the edges, we have a split rail fence that was erected by the county when they built the building. And so hanging either near or off the fence, we have a variety of different bird feeding or bird staging areas. If I go all the way over, let's just pan across it while we're looking. We have the water saucer. So I'm going to zoom back over to the water saucer here. So that's on the fence rail. On the very west end, let me pan back out so that we're not looking quite so close at it. And then we can just start stepping across. To the right of the water saucer, I have a bird feeder which has a dome-shaped bell on the top that keeps water that comes when it rains, keeps it from getting the seed in the tray below wet. And we'll see birds and squirrels. Squirrels are very happy to jump from the fence rail right into that feeder. So that's one bird feeder. Sometimes we hang a thistle feeder there. And in the summer, when the hummingbirds come, that's where we hang our hummingbird feeder, because the hummingbirds have no problem coming up close to the observation window. It allows people inside the observation room to get very close and see the hummingbirds up close. So that feeder there is, or feeder position, varies what we put into it from time to time. But as we pan to the right over the next section of fence rail, we step over to an area where, and I need to back up just a little bit because we have some nice pine trees that are off to the western side of the observation area. And the birds will come from the canyon and land first in the pine tree and then move from there over to one of the other staging areas in the observation wildlife area. I'm backing out just a little more so that we can pan over. We had a red-breasted nuthatch hop in here just a second ago. And of course, a lot of these nuthatches, when they come in to feed, they come to the feeder, they snatch a piece of something and fly away with it. Whereas a bird like the junco that is currently on the tray feeder they tend to sit around there. They may sit for 5 minutes. All the different birds have different personalities and different behavior styles. And so as I'm panning to the right, we're beginning to see on the right-hand edge of the screen the tray feeder where the mixed seed is put in that tray feeder for the most part. And if you look behind the tray feeder, there's another post in the fence rail where you can see there's a dead twig. So I can sort of focus, let's say, for a moment on that snag by zooming into it. And it's just a dead snag that is screwed onto the back of the fence rail there. And its purpose is purely to let the birds, oh, we have a western bluebird. I need to reposition things here very quickly to the pond close up. Pond close up. And let's see if we can pick up this western bluebird that's sitting right there and splashing and taking a bath in the pond. So this is about the time when the western bluebirds are getting to be pretty active. There's 2 of them now. They seem to be enjoying each other's company. That's the good thing about spring, isn't it? So that's a pair of western bluebirds. And I went back up to the fence. Now we have a red-breasted nuthatch. Oh, there's the bluebirds still. Before I head off looking to a different thing. Siobhan sees a house finch somewhere. Oh, on the pond. Oh, yes. There's a house finch down there bathing in the waterfall. The water runs down to a big flat rock over there. I want to see if that red-breasted nuthatch will cooperate with us and come by, and we can watch him on. So I'm looking for a position. Let's go over here to the. We have some birds that are crossing in. Now we don't get a good look at that particular feeder location where the red-breasted nuthatch is coming in, but maybe he'll go over to the suet feeder and we'll try to catch him there. Well, let me resume the tour for a moment. You can see the tray feeder in the upper left corner, and as we move along the fence rail, there's a little trough feeder on the top fence rail right in the center of this picture, and we put mixed bird seed in there. You can't see it because the tray feeder is obscuring it, but that's where the red-breasted nuthatch is going. Then if we move further to the right, you can see we have a suet feeder hanging on the fence, and I'm scrolling further to the right because if we go over fast enough, we might, okay, the bluebirds, I was trying to scan back to get the bluebirds, but they went back down to bathe in the pond, so I'm chasing them. So there they are. And we've got some more bathers. And that bluebird is just one gorgeous male. And I don't know how close the camera will let me get to it. Then we have a house finch in the center of that rock. Our bluebird and the house finch are dancing around each other, I guess. So that's intentionally a very shallow area of the pond that is intended to attract the birds and allow them to bathe there. That's the red-breasted nuthatch. That is, Siobhan is noticing the red-breasted nuthatch who's making regular visits to a feeder that isn't really easily visible. So let's just pull back to the broader view of the whole area. And we've been taking a tour around. You can see in almost the upper center part of the picture here is where that suet feeder is. And the birds are coming in. We have some seed that we've scattered on the bricks at the base of the fence rail. And a lot of juncos come in there. Right now we have, I'm looking for my binoculars. Let's take a look and see. We have gray-headed junco that you can see is just a little speck in the screen. We have a chipmunk sitting up on the top rail of the fence. There are a couple of chipmunks on the rock below the tray feeder. And a squirrel over in the far area by the pond pump. Yeah, Siobhan wants to have us talk a little bit about the trees. If I pull back, we can get a broader picture of the whole area. Let me zoom back. That is more a picture of, well, camera has to readjust a little bit, but we're pulled back to a pretty wide angle, and I want to have us looking up a little higher at the trees that are there at the western area of the observation area. The trees are all ponderosas. There's 4 of them. They seem to be reasonably healthy. We worry about those trees because they're on a pretty steep slope, and some of the trees that we've had along the western area here have died, but these are fortunately looking pretty good. There is one tree that is in the middle of all of this that seems to have a little more density of dead needles. And I don't know if that's just because I don't know if there's something wrong with that tree or not. I can't tell. But this is definitely the area where the birds will fly in from the canyon. And one of the favorite perches is in the left center of the picture here, and I can zoom over that. This is a perch that we often look at in that one tree that is the place acorn woodpeckers will fly in. So sometime before our hour is up here today, I bet we'll get an acorn woodpecker to come in and check out the observation area. So I'm going to now pull back to the sort of the home view where we get to see both the pond and all the way over to the tray feeder. And we'll just wait and see what other interesting birds show up here in the next few minutes. So the essential elements, let's go back to that. We need water, we need food, and we need places for birds to hide, particularly if there's any predators. We have some predators. We've seen bobcats back here. And there are various raptors that have come by, sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks. We see off in the distance red-tailed hawks flying over the canyon, but it's not common to have a red-tailed hawk actually go after a little old tiny bird. They want a larger size animal than that. People have reported seeing golden eagles flying over the canyon too. So we have our share of raptors. We've just begun the spring migration season, and just 2 or 3 days ago, on the 15th of March, we had some turkey vultures show up again at the roost that they've occupied for as many years as most of us can remember. And this roost is over in Los Alamos Canyon, just behind the ice skating rink. And there you'll see in the middle of the season, early summer, all summer long, there'll be 30, 40, or 50 turkey vultures spending the night there. And they all warm up their feathers early in the morning, fly off, and go soaring around Los Alamos area during the daytime, come back in the evening. So it's a daily event. And our turkey vultures are one of the first migrants to return in the spring. And when the turkey vultures return, there is another raptor, the zone-tailed hawk, that also comes by. And he likes to follow the turkey vultures because other birds can't tell the difference between a zone-tailed hawk and a turkey vulture. They fly the same way and intentionally imitate turkey vultures, and that gives them sort of an advantage to hunting because other birds aren't scared off by them. So we get zone-tailed hawks. They're a very attractive bird with a banded tail, and they're always fun to see. They're not really all that common this far north. They tend to be a more southern U.S. bird, and we're just about at the northern end of the range of a zone-tailed hawk. So we should be seeing those in the next several weeks. Turkey vultures, zone-tailed hawks. The best way to tell the difference between a zone-tailed hawk and a turkey vulture is to get close enough to see that, of course, the turkey vultures have that bare red head. Turkey vulture is actually larger than a zone-tailed hawk, but that's always a difficult identification mark to use when the bird is way off in the distance. It's hard to get a good sense of the size of the bird. The zone-tailed hawk has a black head and yellow feet, whereas the turkey vultures look darker all over, and zone-tailed hawks have banded tails. So if you get a close enough look at it where you can see the feathers on the tail of the bird, zone-tailed hawk will be easy to tell apart. We have a lull in activity right now, and that happens. Sometimes the birds come in, and you never know. Oh, heavens. Siobhan asked me, what's the most exciting bird you've ever seen? That's like asking a guy who goes, I know, she's talking about right here at the Nature Center. And that's a very difficult question to answer because so many birds are so interesting. It's hard to pick one over the other. Let's see. Would you believe I saw an egret, which is a water bird, fly over the canyon one time on a very cloudy day? So I don't know if that's my favorite bird, but it's about as unusual as you would expect to see at this location in the county. You would normally expect to see an egret down by the river. But other interesting birds, I have a lot of birds that I think are just very special when they show up. Like we've had green-tailed towhees, and they may be showing up in the next 3 or 4 weeks as they migrate from lower elevations up to the mountains. They tend to spend their summers in the mountains and their winters down closer to the river. And so we get to see them as they move from low to high. So I really like green-tailed towhees. They're very subtly colors. Their colors are very subtle and very attractive. I have to, yeah, in the springtime you can't. Siobhan's just put in a vote for a western tanager, which has got to be one of the most colorful birds that we see here. They're just beautiful, bright yellow birds with black wings and red blush on their heads. I'm talking about the males. But we've got a lot of really colorful birds right now. Just a few blocks from the Nature Center, there's a collection of evening grosbeaks that live in the trees near the Canyon Village apartments, and they're the males of the evening grosbeak are just very distinctively marked with yellow eyebrows and nice, rich, warm brown feathers, white wing patches. They're very attractive birds. And of course, we just saw just a few minutes ago when the western bluebirds were here. You can't really do a whole lot better for a colorful bird than to see a male western bluebird in the spring. So they're very attractive. Earlier this morning, I ran across a mountain bluebird. I went over to the stables, and there's mountain bluebirds that hang out over at the stables. They're just absolutely gorgeous powder blue, pastel blue birds, of course. And it's a special treat because we live in a community where mountain bluebirds can be seen fairly regularly. And that's not something that many people in the United States can say. So we get mountain bluebirds. They're really gorgeous. A lot of the other spring birds, they come through, they're in breeding plumage, and that includes things like warblers. One very attractively colored bird is the yellow-rumped warbler. We get, they come with black and yellow and just very strongly marked birds, and we should be seeing those in the next month. Probably the 1st of May, we'll see yellow rump warblers in their breeding plumage. There's lots of other warblers that like to come to the canyons down below the Nature Center, and because there is an intermittent stream that runs in at the base of Pueblo Canyon, there's a bunch of willows that grow there, and the warblers really love to hang out in those willows down at the base of Pueblo Canyon, where it meets up with Acid Canyon. So that's probably one of the #1 places in the entire county to go to see birds. There are lots of good spots, and it depends. If you are into hiking in a big way, you want to make sure you go down the Blue Dot Trail in White Rock off of the overlook, and go down Blue Dot Trail to the river. And you get a different mix of species down there because it's a lower elevation. There's the permanent water that's provided by the Rio Grande, and so the bosky area down there is a great place to see some birds that we don't see as often. This year already, people have seen black-capped chickadees and black-billed magpies that are fairly common at lower elevations, but not as common, and you won't see them up in Los Alamos on any regular basis. So you can walk all the way down from the Blue Dot Trail to the river. You can walk either upstream to the county line, Los Alamos County line bosque, we call it, but it's a nice bosque area there that right on the county line between Los Alamos County and Santa Fe County. If you go the other direction, you can walk from the Blue Dot Trail over to the Red Dot Trail and come all the way back up. Oh, I see a white-breasted nuthatch. I got interrupted mentally here because there's a white-breasted nuthatch on one of the trees down in the canyon, and I suspect he'll make his way up here pretty soon. Anyway, let's go back down to hiking near the river. You can walk all the way from the Blue Dot Trail along the river edge pretty much and up the Red Dot Trail and come up into Lucinda in White Rock. And so you can get quite a variety of birds down there that you wouldn't see otherwise. So that's a really good area. One area that PEEC is interested in trying to develop, and we're working with the county to investigate ways of doing that, is it's really remarkable, but there is a small pond of standing water that is on the east side of the Smith's Marketplace. So that entire area that was developed by putting a big old parking lot, and when it rains, all the water rushes off that parking lot in a big way, and it drains into a retention pond that is to the east of Smith's Marketplace, along where 6th Street exits Trinity to the south. And we call that the 6th Street Pond. And because it has water, and you can access it by going to the Smith's parking lot and then finding the Canyon Rim Trail there, follow the Canyon Rim Trail to the east, and you walk right past Smith's, and you past the 6th Street Pond, and you're in an area where there's trees along the canyon edge, water standing in the pond, at least after a rain, and that area is almost on a par with the confluence area I talked about before for seeing a great number of different birds. The water treatment plants that we have in town are also very good places to see birds, but they're not really developed for normal hiking. I mean, it's pretty much bushwhacking. The 2 water treatment plants I'm thinking of is in Overlook Park, of course, down in White Rock. There's the White Rock water treatment plant, and there's always interesting birds there. And then the water treatment plant that's in Lower Pueblo Canyon is really hard to get to because there's no roads, just hiking trails that are available for you to access that. But the outflow area there has some very unique birds that are not normally seen in everybody's backyards in the residential areas of Los Alamos County. Water is the crucial element in all of these. The birds is where you live in a dry climate, so any place where birds know that they can reliably find water is going to get a good number of birds of different varieties coming in to visit. We are still being very quiet here. I see a white-breasted nuthatch way out in the canyon who's flitting around, but hasn't decided he's brave enough to come over here and eat from our feeders. So we'll just be patient and see what happens. We've had a few ravens flying over the canyon. It's nice and sunny outside today, and I can actually point the camera over there. Sometimes it's interesting to look at using the cameras to actually look up at the sky and see what's coming in the summertime. We've used this camera to make time-lapse movies of thunderstorms building over the mountains, and it makes for a very interesting view to see that. Siobhan asks, where did the camera come from? And so this was actually a project that was funded by a very generous donation from the Pechek family. And they made a donation to PEEC, and we're using some of those funds to put the video camera in and for continual upgrading of the area here in the back. We'll have some plans that we hope we can get in place here for this summer. And so we got funding to improve the wildlife area, and then had a member of the Boy Scout troop, number 222, Jonathan Moulton, came and made a Eagle Scout project out of installing the camera and improving some of the wildlife area back here. And we've got a few crows that are coming in, so let's move the camera back over here and see if we can see the crows that just decided to show up. Aim the camera down a little bit, and you can see a crow sitting over there on the fence. We do have another feeder as we go east along the observation area. And so now we have a couple of crows that are going to sit there on the... Oh, we have an acorn woodpecker is what... No, that is an acorn woodpecker, and he is flying in. I'm going to move away from the crows and go back to the home area. The acorn woodpecker is obscured in the view you're looking at by the tray feeder, but he may... Let's see where he goes after he gets his... Yeah, he was going back over there. You could see he just flew over to the tree to the west. So let's see if we can zoom in on that tree and get a look at him. There he is. He's hopping down. So there's our acorn woodpecker. That looks like a male, if I'm not mistaken. No, or it's a female. I can't see without my binoculars because I'm so old.
What are you looking for to tell the difference?
Well, so this is a female acorn woodpecker, and the distinctive marking is that the pattern of white and red, both the male and the female acorn woodpeckers have red patches on their head, but the red patch that is on the back and top of the head of the acorn woodpecker is separated from the white right above its nose by a black band, and that makes it a female. So now she's hiding over here behind the tray feeder. Let's see once she gets her bite or two of seed, and she'll go back to her perch. Yeah. Well, there's a mountain chickadee on that feeder, but he doesn't stay long, so I can't chase chickadees very well. But let's go over and see. It looks like the crow is setting up housekeeping over here. I'm going to focus. Two more what? Oh, way over there? Okay. Well, I can go back to look at, I think, the rock you're talking about. We're zooming. There's a couple of crows. And so these crows, Siobhan asks, how do you tell the difference between a crow and a raven? They're obviously very similar looking birds. Crows are a little smaller, and so if you can convince the birds to stand side by side, then you can tell easily that the crow is a smaller bird than the raven, but that's not a very easy thing to do. So the other marks that you can look for is look at the shape of the bill on the crow. And I'll try to zoom in and see if we can get a little closer to these guys. The bill shape on a crow is pointed, whereas the bill shape on a raven, the bill is much heavier and tends to be sort of curved along the top and flat on the bottom. So the bill shape is different. If you only can see them flying in the air, one of the things to check is the shape of the tail. The crow, when it flies, tends to hold its tail straight back, and it's flat on the back end, whereas the tail shape on a raven is more wedge shaped.
Yeah.
So we now have a couple of acorn woodpeckers. Let me go back, and I'm going to reposition the camera off the crows back to the perch on the feeder here, on the tree, I mean, to the west. So we have a acorn woodpecker sitting there, and then there's another one you can't hear. We've turned the sound off in the wildlife area here. Normally, instead of hearing me, you would just hear the birds, but it's hard with the equipment that we have and electronics we have right now. I don't have a way of separately regulating the volume of the sound of the birds and my voice, so we found it was easier yesterday when we were playing around just to turn the bird sounds off. But the acorn woodpeckers are making a nice loud racket, and you can see, well, there's another one that is pulling in there. So we have two of them. Acorn woodpeckers are a very interesting bird because we got three of them here in the image right now. They're all sitting over there chattering at us. Acorn woodpeckers are community nesters, so they raise their young, and the young are taken care of by the community of birds. So, and of course, acorn woodpeckers, when the school children come in, I always like to ask I ask the school children, what kind of food does an acorn woodpecker like to eat? And that's obviously a trick question, but they are especially happy in years when we have a good acorn harvest in the Gamble Oaks around the county. And they peck holes in dead trees. That's one reason why leaving some dead trees up is nice, because a lot of the birds use those for nesting cavities and storing food. And that's what the acorn woodpeckers do, is they'll shove acorns into the holes that they peck in the trunk of the trees, and then come back later and use them when the acorns aren't on the oak trees anymore and they need food supplies. Looks like the acorn woodpeckers have moved on, so I'm going to pull back and look at the whole observation area again. You can see a couple of crows that are still feeding off of a trough feeder that's on the back of that fence rail. So there he goes. Fly down to the pond and maybe get himself a drink.
Do you have any recommendations for birding spots that are outside of Los Alamos, like in northern Mexico in general?
Well, almost any place. Siobhan asks what good birding spots are there elsewhere in New Mexico. And once again, if you find a place that's got access to water and cover and food, there's going to be birds there. People like to bird all the way along the Rio Grande from Taos to Elephant Butte, and birds all along the Rio Grande River. And of course, the most famous location along the Rio Grande is the Bosque del Apache, which is where all the sandhill cranes come in the winter. And you've probably seen flocks of them flying north because they've left and it's time to go north for the summer. But the Bosque del Apache, while it's famous for its winter congregations of sandhill cranes and snow geese, there are always birds there all year round. So any place with water is pretty good. The mountains are always pretty nice. You can go up into the Jemez Mountains and walk along the streams up there, like Los Conchas, and go up to the Via Caldera, and you'll see lots of birds, especially of the mountain species. So we're very fortunate to live in a very birdy part of the country. Another place that PEEC has run some birding walks is up at a state historic site about 7 miles north of Espanola called Los Luceros. And it is a wonderful place. It's an old working ranch or farm, and the birds there have just been fabulous every time we've gone. Being a state site right now, I'm sure they're closed, and so you'll have to keep tabs on when things start opening again. But look for on the PEEC event calendar for when we've got walks scheduled at Los Luceros, and sign up for one of them, because they are really wonderful places to see birds. You can see birds both in open fields where they raise, I guess, I don't think it's grain, maybe it's clover or something like that, but they've got fields where they are raising hay and feed. They have fruit trees, so that attracts a lot of birds. Then as you walk towards the river from Los Luceros, you can see ducks along the Rio Grande, herons. We've always seen lots of magpies and yellow-breasted chats. A lot of birds that are not as common here in Los Alamos you can see at Los Luceros. So I know that there's walks that were originally on PEEC's schedule for probably April and May and June. And so let's just keep an eye open and see when we can start those trips back up again. And you'll find that to be a very interesting outing. Of course, being outdoors and looking at birds is a great activity while we're all maintaining social distances from each other. The hard part of still doing those trips, aside from the fact that places like Los Luceros are closed, is that if you're on birding trips where you're going to be carpooling, then everybody in the carpool is all sitting in close quarters with everyone else. So if you're going to go out into the hiking the trails around the county, then I guess you need to everybody needs to meet at the trailhead rather than carpooling in one car. Or go by yourself, yes. But if you're going to try to bird in groups, keep the groups small. Everybody should keep the appropriate distance. Well, we have a mountain chickadee who's going over to the suet feeder. You can probably see him in a tiny view here. Let's go up and take a close-up look at the suet feeder and see if he comes back. So Siobhan says, if you wanted to attract birds to your own yard, what would be the first or most important things to do? And the elements that are present in all good bird habitats you can provide in your own backyard, and that's water. And we talked about anything from a bird bath to a pond to flipping a flower pot saucer upside down. Those are all ways of just putting a little pool of water out there. Cover, well, almost everybody has in their yards some trees or bushes. A lot of times the birds really like dense bushes down low to the ground, because if a hawk or something comes in and swoops by, then they can go dive into these bushes and get some protection. But the bushes also provide for quite a large number of birds places where they can nest. So they want to have access to food, which you can provide either by seed or suet, or if you raise flowers and have a garden, that'll attract some number of insects. And probably the number one of the diet of most birds around here will be insects, even though a lot of them eat seeds. If you put a pot of insects out and a pot of seeds, they probably go to the mealworms or insects first. That's the biggest dietary part, because insects provide protein a lot more than the seeds do. So insects, you can create insects by planting flowers. Of course, you want to minimize or eliminate the use of insecticides. So water, places to hide, places to build nests, those are the elements of a habitat. And if you have all of those things, we've had an effort going on at PEEC for some time to get members of the community to certify their yards as wildlife habitats. And you can do that with the National Wildlife Federation. They have their own website, and you can probably find, as Siobhan was saying, do we have links to that from our blog post today? You can see of Los Alamos that have who have encouraged individuals to certify their yards. Many of the county sites have been certified. I think Ashley Pond, for example, is a certified area, and so is the Master Gardener's Demonstration Garden. It's okay. So I've got to double check to make sure that my audio here is working. Well, so yeah, Jonathan Creel asks about threats that our bird populations face. The Cornell Ornithology Lab has done studies, and clearly the one major threat to birds are house cats. They are responsible for killing, and I would have to actually look it up, but in the billions of birds. And so about the only thing you can do there is to keep your cats indoors. Obviously, that's not going to happen universally, but if at least in my case, in my yard, many of the feeders that I put out there, I put in a place that is enough in the open that a cat isn't exactly going to sneak up on the feeder and snatch a bird right off the feeder. So I hang them or put them out in the open. Of course, that's good for me because I can see the bird better. He's not hiding in the bushes. So okay, so Siobhan looked up the number. Somewhere between 1.5 and 3 billion birds in the continental U.S. are killed every year by cats. So that's the number one threat. The number two threat is probably loss of habitat. I think you can look it up, but the removal of trees, even dead trees, things like that, that takes away a lot of important areas where birds use for nesting and hiding and things like that. There's enough food out there, I think, in the absence of drought or unusual weather conditions. The birds probably have been eating a variety of foods. So I don't think even the food we put out there is more for our benefit because it attracts birds to places where we can see them. But loss of habitat, and of course, part of the habitat is changing because our weather's been warming up. So the whole climate change phenomenon is causing birds to either migrate at the wrong time. Let's think about hummingbirds for a minute. Hummingbirds migrate from, most of the ones we see at least that are migratory, they come from southern Mexico and make their way up to the United States, either as in areas as close as us. We have 2 species of hummingbirds that breed here in Los Alamos County. Going over the water saucer while we've got this cute little pygmy nuthatch over here, so maybe he'll stick around. Of course, he left just as soon as he realized that he was having his picture taken. But maybe he'll come back. Pygmy nuthatches, several of them flew into the ponderosa trees here to the west. So hummingbirds, I was talking about the hummingbirds. We should start seeing them by the 1st of April. And so it's not too soon to, hold on just a second. I see a very interesting bird. There is a Cassin's finch in the tree to the west. And so I don't know if he'll come up, but if we get a chance and he parks himself somewhere where we can see him, there comes a pygmy nuthatch back to the water saucer. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we'll actually post. We've been recording this entire hour, and so we'll post this video later, and we can revisit it. I'm moving back to an acorn woodpecker that a pair of them have come back over there to their favorite little perch on the tree to the west. So we're getting a little more activity of birds now that we're sort of wrapping up our 1-hour broadcast. We do have evening grosbeaks, and I mentioned that briefly earlier. People have seen them, not in large numbers like we've had some time before, but we do have evening grosbeaks reported, and if you wanted to maximize the chance that you could see one, you'd probably want to go over to the Canyon Village Apartments and drive all the way along the parking lot to the west, and you can probably pick up some evening grosbeaks. Now, I'm panning back to the water saucer because we have a very special bird right now on that. That's a red crossbill. Red crossbills are very, whoops, the chipmunk scared it off. But the red crossbills have been here for about the last year, and they are a very unique bird to our area because their bills are shaped in a way to make it easy for them to pull pine seeds out of pine cones. So it was nice that we got a red crossbill to come in right as we're wrapping up. So this is a video stream. It's available 24/7. We keep it on all the time. It does record motion or activities when something goes on, and we try to look through the recordings that we collect each day and then make them available on the PEEC website if they're sufficiently interesting. So you're always welcome to tune in and see what's going on at the Nature Center. Grosbeaks are large members of the finch family, I think, and like most members of the finch family, they like to eat seeds, and so our grosbeaks will come in and polish off all the black oil sunflower seed that they can get their hands on. think I've got a pygmy nuthatch drinking out of the water saucer. That'll show up here in just a second. I'm double checking. Yeah, he's sitting over there and having a sip, and now he took off. Let's see. Do I have anything else interesting going on? We have a mountain chickadee that's over. Just pan over there quickly, and he's blurry because the camera doesn't have a clue where to focus right now. But I can pull more condors. We have a request for condors, and we have a very special location here for condors, but it's not at the Nature Center, I'm sorry to say. Acorn woodpecker is over there playing on the suet feeder. I'll dash over to the suet feeder and see if he hangs out there before he takes off. So this is a female acorn woodpecker on the suet feeder. I got a little chipmunk who decided he'd go over back near the water saucer. I'm going to run back to the water saucer. There went the acorn woodpecker. So let's go back to the feeder next to the water saucer. We got a little chipmunks decided to jump in there and feast on all that bird seed. So yes, they find that a great place to get some free delicacies every day. So I guess we're going to wrap this up. All right. I want to thank everybody who came and tuned in while we were playing out here in the observation area. Let us know if you want us to do it again sometime. Take care, and thank you for joining us. Come by the Nature Center someday when we all get opened back up again, and join us. There's a lot of activity on most days here that you can see in the wildlife area, and just come back into the observation room, sit down, and relax. Until then, please visit PEEC's website at peeknature.org, and everybody stay healthy out there. Thank you.